Bhagwan Shri Yogi Ramsuratkumar ke Sarvam Yogi Ramsuratkumar Arpanamastu. Okay. Yogi Ramsuratkumar. With deep gratitude, we shall start the story of his glory. It's a very interesting and instructive story. One that touched me very much in depths. It's not exactly coming to the rescue, it is coming to the rescue of the person, but in a very different way. There is this British Columbia in Canada, and there is an ashram which has Yogi Ramsuratkumar's Murti as the presiding deity. Srimati Lalitha, an American, is running the ashram, and Jim Capilini is helping her. They have quite a few members residing in the ashram, very near the North Pole, as Bhagwan would say. Now Jim has written an article where he has talked about his experience with Bhagwan. He says he had come to India 2 times or 3 times before Mahasamadhi of Bhagwan. 1986, 1989, and again in 1993. Those 2 times, 1986, 89, they had come to know Sri Ganeshan of Ramanashram. And at that time there was no ashram for Yogi Bhagwan. So Ganeshana arranged for the stay in Ramanashram. And Bhagwan went and met them in Ananda Ramana, the cottage where Sri Ganeshana is staying even now. There is a sit-out there facing the garden, and Bhagwan loved sitting there. Ganeshana says more than 60 times Bhagwan had visited Anandaramana. there was a period he would visit every day, stay on the whole day with Sri Ganeshan. Now, Jim Capilini says those first 2 times when he sat with Bhagwan, it was a very different experience. He found out that Yogi Ramsuratkumar was transforming the suffering of all around him. And sitting in the inner silence of Bhagwan Yogi Ramsuratkumar, he learned to listen to that reality that exists only in silence. He learned to attend. He learned that attention which alone could help him know the silence, the depths of the being. There was very little talk outside, and in between the words that he uttered, there was much more in the silence of the gap that he learned. The vibrant energy of Bhagwan was so intense. There was a transmission straight from his soul to his soul. And then the story, the interesting part of his interaction with Bhagwan comes. When he was living in the Arizona ashram with Mr. Lee, Mr. Lee had a small group, a troupe, a music troupe. He called it the Bowl. The Bowl troupe. The Bowl, or the West Bengali, even now you could see them. They would go in the streets singing songs on gods, completely absorbed in their singing and dancing. And getting bhiksha from people was a small part of their rhythm. Now, Jim Capilini was playing a singing role. He has a very good voice, which was well appreciated by the local instructor, a lady instructor. She was all appreciation for his voice and the rendering of songs, that she kept on encouraging him. Once before, when he was performing in Mr. Lee's troupe, one famous director of those times had listened to him, and he liked Jim's way of singing, his voice, everything. Now, encouraged by this, his local instructor, the lady, was trying to prepare Jim for a greater role in the upcoming movie, a musical by the famous, well-reputed director. And what was more, the director was going to visit their town. So she kept urging him to prepare for the audition before that reputed director. So he was preparing 2 particular songs for audition, and there were 3 more weeks before the director would come to the place. even as he was practicing these two songs for the audition, and if it went successful, he would be given a very important role in the movie. And which meant greater fame, popularity, and a broader theatrical setting. He took Mr. Lee's permission for this audition, knowing all the consequences if he should win the heart of the director by his singing. But strangely, in the back of his mind, there was a conflict. There was a question. And the question, there was a voice, a small voice, however, that was grumbling. It said, "What are you doing? Why do you want this audition? Why do you want to play a role in a movie? Why do you want to expand your theatrical setting? Will it take you towards God? Or will it your life become an expression of your ego, which is what is so for many of us. Everyone's life is an expression of their ego. So this question, this voice became louder and louder, and it was nagging, niggling in the back of his mind, so much so at one point he was in a dilemma. He did not know what to do. He was very, very confused. Now there were only 2 more weeks for the audition. The instructor was very enthusiastic and urged him further on and on for the great preparation, for the great performance day before the director. Now one day he and his Sangha mate, they traveled in a car to Los Angeles, and miles of desert stretched before them. And as they were traveling, they were discussing the dharma of a spiritual student. And again, this question was raised by Jim, whether he was going in the right direction, preparing for the audition, preparing the songs for the audition before the director, which would pave another path towards fame and probably the tinsel world. Now the deep questioning, it kind of drained his strength, and there was a moment of weakness. He was unable to decide what was his dharma. In a moment of extreme confusion about the path he should take at this crossroads. He was very devoted to Bhagwan. He was chanting his name. So again the question came up. Will it take me towards Yogi Ramsuratkumar further, or will it take me away from Yogi Ramsuratkumar towards my ego? The question came up. What a question. If only we could ask, every one of us could ask this question before we do anything, before our every action. Will it please Yogi Ramsuratkumar? Will it take me further towards Yogi Ramsuratkumar or away from him? How well we would be guided by the divine. This happened to Jim in his extreme confusion, because there was a part of his heart which would not budge, which did not want to move away from Yogi Ramsuratkumar, which wanted so much to serve Mr. Lee and Yogi Ramsuratkumar in all sincerity, earnestness. And just at that moment, something happened inside. There was a burst of light, and he knew instantly what to do. It did not come through his brain. It did not come from an elaborate thinking. Out of this extreme weakness, a moment of extreme weakness, extreme confusion, suddenly there was light. And in a flash, he knew what to do. He knew not to take up this audition, but to go on serving Mr. Lee and Yogi Ramsuratkumar. He knew instantly this audition might lead him away from Yogi Ramsuratkumar. And that made it. He decided he would not even attend this audition. So the 2 weeks passed by, and the day of performance came. He did not even bother to attend that. His teacher, the instructor, was very disappointed because she was preparing all along for this great moment. But he felt very light. He had no other alternative except the one, the decision that came to him. He did not decide. The decision came to him in a moment of revelation. He calls it epiphany, a sudden revelation, a sudden spot of wisdom. Now, as they were going, during that journey, when they were going towards Los Angeles, they found in a place a flyer which said there was going to be a talk by Sri Ganesh of Ashram in 2 months' time. It had mentioned a date which was 2 months away. And they were surprised, they were delighted when they saw this grandnephew, the great-grandnephew, that is Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi's brother, Swami Niranjanananda, his grandson. Sri Ganeshan was coming there to give a talk, and right from the place of Yogi Ramsuratkumar, Thiruvannamalai. You can imagine they were absolutely overwhelmed, and they decided then and there that they would attend it no matter what. So 2 months after, they were waiting, and 2 months after the day came. At the time Mr. Lee was away in Europe. There are ashrams there in Europe, in Germany, France, where Yogi Ramsuratkumar's Nama is being chanted even today, and spiritual activities are going on. So Jim Capilini, another Sangam mate, proceeded. They found the place where he was giving the talk was Jerome. He calls it a ghost town, an abandoned place where of late a community of artists began to live. The whole population was just 420. It's a small town, a ghost town, and Ganeshana was going to come there and give a talk, and they were wondering how many people would attend. The place is far away and it's a very small town. Already there were just 420 people only. In any case, it's from the place of Yogi Ramsuratkumar. How could they miss it? They proceeded, and when they went to the village, that city, the small city, and the hall where the speech was arranged. When they entered, they found 100 people sitting there. And Sri Ganeshana started to talk. He started with Bhagwan, Sri Raman Maharishi, his teachings, and then he could not help mentioning Yogi Ramsuratkumar. He said, the very reason that I stand before you giving this talk is because of this Mahatma, Yogi Ramsuratkumar. It is he who urged me to take up these foreign trips to talk about the teachings of Ramana Bhagwan. And then he went on to describe some of his experiences with Yogi Ramsuratkumar. Now these two people, Jim and his Sangha mate, they were drunk with the reflections, reminiscences of the thought of Yogi Ramsuratkumar. And after the speech was over, they were waiting near the gate, near the door, waiting for Sri Ganeshana to come. They had already visited Tiruvannamalai 2 times, and it was Sri Ganeshana who arranged their stay in Ramanashram. And as soon as Ganeshana came out, when he saw them, there was instant recognition on his face. And then he said, you people have come? Oh good, I have something to give you. And then he took out a small bag and said, this was straight from Yogi Ramsuratkumar. You can imagine how Jim would have felt. And what was more, Ganeshana told him, just before I left, Yogi Swami came and he gave this small bag of dry gooseberries and said, you would meet up with a true friend of Mr. Lee. Give this to him. Jim was flabbergasted. He did not know what to say. He was stunned. Ganeshana went on to say, now I have met you, so this is meant for you. And then he dropped that little bag into the hands of Jim Capilini. Jim stood there speechless. How could Yogi Ramsuratkumar say that Ganeshana would run into a true friend of Mr. Lee? Jim was also very doubtful whether he was the person described by Bhagwan, though Ganeshana was giving it. He even thought Ganeshana might be giving these gooseberries to other people also. It's not something special. But Ganeshana insisted he was not giving it to anybody. It was from Yogi Ramsuratkumar and meant only for that true friend of Mr. Lee. And then Jim wanted to know when exactly it happened, when Yogi Ramsuratkumar came and gave this bag of gooseberries. Ganeshana, it was Ganeshana's turn to be surprised. He said, why do you ask me? Of course I know the precise moment when he came and gave me. But why do you want to know? Then Jim said, no, I have reasons. I will tell you later. Please tell me. And then Ganeshana mentioned the date and the time when he met. Now Jim made very quick calculations. There's a difference of 12 and a half hours between his place and India. When all that was done, this little calculation in the mind, he found out it was exactly the moment that he had the flash in the car when he was absolutely confused. He was lying in the labyrinth of confusion, unable to come out, unable to decide which way to go at the crossroads. There was a sudden moment of revelation and he knew instantly what to do. He will not go away from Yogi Ramsuratkumar. This audition would take him away from him, away from the service of Mr. Lee, away from the service of Yogi Ramsuratkumar. So he decided against the audition. And he knew that was the moment Yogi Ramsuratkumar chose to hand over this bag of gooseberries, saying, "You would find a true friend of Mr. Lee." Because Jim decided he would serve Mr. Lee, and through Mr. Lee he would serve Yogi Ramsuratkumar. The faithfulness. And then Jim knew in a flash it was not the decision of his own. It was Yogi Ramsuratkumar's decision for him. And he knew immediately all the decisions he had always taken in life. The divine Yogi Ramsuratkumar was behind them, though he thought that he made them. It was always the divine behind. Then he says that he, in course of his talks with people, in his interactions with other people, he would drop in sentences like, "Oh, there are no mistakes, everything happens only by God's will," this and that. He never really meant them because he never really went into the depth of those statements. Those statements are all the truth of someone else. It was not his truth. It was not his experience. He was simply parroting someone else's truth. But then, that day, that moment, when the revelation came, and now another revelation in front of Ganeshana, that it was Yogi Ramsuratkumar who chose that moment of revelation for him, who made the decision for him. He knew that behind all his thoughts, behind all his decisions, behind even all those mistakes that he made, he was there. The divine Yogi Ramsuratkumar was behind, supporting. And inducing thoughts, decisions. Though he wound it up as his own decision, he knew that it was he behind. What a revelation. This is the truth for all of us also. It's just that we are ignorant of it. Every thought, it comes because there's only the divine. Father alone exists, there is nothing else, no one else. Which means Father is all of us. Father has become all of us. And Father is activating all of us. Father is playing our roles. Every thought, every word, every action, they come from the source, the Supreme. But why are they not godly? Because the same God is playing a role. The God is not playing the role of God. He is playing your role and my role. And therefore he has to play it with the ignorance, the ego that fits in with our form, with our life. But then, this moment of revelation, he understood that there is only God, there is only Father, there is only Yogi Ramsuratkumar behind all thoughts, words and actions. that he could no more claim anything as his own. I remember once when he got a seat for Ph.D., I almost joined and I started, but then a similar doubt came. I had already met Bhagwan, and then the thought came to me, just like Jim, for me it was a struggle because I had ambitions to go to one of the best universities in the States, one of the best laboratories I wanted to work in. So I had this dilemma after joining Ph.D. So I ran to Bhagwan in Tiruvannamalai. I came to Sannidhi Street House and I asked him, Bhagwan, my completion of Ph.D., will it take me towards you or take me away from you? He said, looking right in the eye, it will take you away from me. And then I gave up. The words came straight from Bhagwan's mouth. Because after that, once we get the ambitions will develop, more and more ambitions will develop, and we would have been led astray. So Bhagwan stopped me in time, just as he stopped Jim in time. This is happening to all of us. If only we care enough to know, to seek guidance from the Divine at the moment of confusion, the moment of indecision. So, let us learn, let's also learn the truth of the statement, there are no mistakes. Nothing is ever a mistake. Bhagwan always said everything is progress. Because everything happens only by Father's will, and whatever happens by Father's will can only be a definite blessing. Father is perfect, his Leela is perfect, and Father is playing our roles. So whatever happens is necessary for our spiritual growth. So he would often say, Devaki, in whatever situation Father keeps us, we should not only accept it as God's blessings, but be grateful to Him for it. He went one step ahead. He said we have to be grateful to God for that. Which meant even the mistakes that we make. He went one step ahead. He said we have to be grateful to God for that. Which meant even the mistakes that we make, because they lead to blessings. They are blessings in disguise. So let's remember this lesson. Let us ask for guidance from Bhagwan at those critical moments in life, whether it would support our path towards Yogi Ramsuratkumar or take us away from that. And let us learn to do only what pleases Him. Now this Bhagwan, who knew the extreme confusion of Jim, who knew the moment it happened, and who blessed him right from Tiruvannamalai, by remembering him, dropping that small bag of gooseberries, saying you would meet up with the true friend of Mr. Lee, and relieving Jim from the burden of dilemma. That Bhagwan is here, right in front of us, with his hand raised in benediction. for all time, for all people. Let us submit today's prarthana at His feet. Bhagwan, there is nothing that you do not know. If you could know what confusion somebody was having thousands of miles away, the exact moment you choose to decide for him